Welcome back to another episode of the Board Game Bambinos. As summer draws near to an end, we wanted to take ourselves back to the beaches one more time, but not all is fun as it seems.
For there is an unseen terror stalking the waters. It is up to you and your friends to find this killer before the summer festivities become a feeding frenzy.
This is Jaws, the board game, by Ravensburger and Universal Studios.
Prepare to be afraid to get back in the water as our adventure unfolds around the quaint fishing town of Amity Island.
The game is split into two primary objectives. One side, you can play as the film's terrifying monster, the shark. This player's objective is to ultimately kill all other players or destroy their boat completely.
On the other end, the other player can play as three of the film's most iconic characters. Their goal is to try and track down the shark and kill it.
Let's take a moment to return where our story begins. The game playthrough is divided into two acts. The first act takes place on the island and the surrounding waters.
The board is divided into multiple sections, indicating areas players can move around in.
Each round will start with the shark player deciding where they will start and to which sections of the water they are going to move around in.
The shark will not reveal to any of the other players what moves they have made. They record the actions in the Shark Tracker book.
Next, the human players will move about the island and water, trying to anticipate where the shark is going to hit next.
Each character has advantages to help them better track down and trap the shark, such as boats and other equipment.
Human characters must move about the map, saving swimmers and releasing motion sensor barrels into the water around them.
Once two barrels are attached to the shark, the game goes into Act 2 as the players can track down the shark to finish it off.
It is important to note that before each set of players decide their moves, an event card will be drawn each round.
These events are what bring swimmers onto the board as well as occasionally benefits to certain characters.
The shark player can advance to the next act by eating enough swimmers and maxing out the swimmer tracker.
This tracker will also determine the number of shark abilities as well as gear the crew can use in the second act, whether it be eating enough swimmers or the attachment of two barrels on the shark.
Act 2 takes place on the Orca. Here players play in the open water as the crew of the boat attempt to finish the shark off.
Beware though, the shark has had enough and is determined to sink and kill the crew of the Orca and can not only roll for die hits but can use shark abilities to do more damage per move.
This phase transfers the game from seek and destroy to a game of hit or miss. The crew have limited number of gear they will have available to each character that can be used to attack and damage the shark.
The crew can move about the boat in the water and choose their weapon each round, as well as a target where they believe the shark will resurface.
As for where the shark can resurface, this is determined by the flip of 3 cards each round that will give the shark player the options for where they can resurface.
The shark player's goal is to strategically attack sections of the boat to either damage it or destroy it completely.
This causes loss of safe ground to human players as they may fall into the water, leaving them open to an attack.
If the shark kills off all 3 crew or sinks the orca entirely, they win the game.
The crew can gain advantages by strategizing how they will use their gear.
For example, a player can use their gun more than once if they have the ammo card, then they discard.
Or by combination uses of gear that can result in heavy damage to the shark.
You son of a...
If the crew manages to reach maximum damage on the shark, killing it, they win the game.
So, hold on to your life jackets as we reel in our final thoughts on Jaws. So I think to really kind of assess this game, since it's actually, you play it in 2 acts, I think it's kind of best to kind of actually break down each act of the game, since it plays a little bit differently each time. So starting with Act 1, is really kind of this, almost sort of this anticipation game. Everybody's trying to kind of anticipate each other's moves. So you got the human players that are kind of trying to figure out where's the shark at, They see where swimmers are getting eaten in certain areas, but you also know the shark's moving around constantly in the water. And the shark is also trying to sort of anticipate, how can I do maximum damage and eat enough swimmers without giving away my position? Because once they know where they're at, they can start kind of laying these motion sensor barrels and kind of building these traps for the shark and stuff. So you know, it's kind of
There's a
fun.
strategy element
right?
to it.
It's kind of fun because you're constantly having to try to think a couple of steps ahead, right? You
Right.
want to know that each move you're making is actually setting you up for a better move next time. So
Uh-huh.
there's really a lot of thinking into it, and I feel like when we were playing it, that I was playing the shark, and then you and Shelby were playing the human characters, and
Right.
I remember you guys actually took a lot of time kind of thinking about what you wanted to do. 'Cause each character also has different abilities they can do, like in terms of how they move about the board. So, really kind of figuring out who's going to be your best person to have here, getting supplies to certain characters on their boats, like barrels and things. You have to go to this shop
Yeah, I
and
didn't
figure
think
that up. And there's this constant thing where you're kind of having to keep multiple things happening at the same time,
I agree.
So, I think, the first act, it felt like, in terms of the gameplay, it certainly felt like it went by a little faster than the second act in the game. And, so, it feels like, definitely, having the different events and, having different swimmers constantly coming out in the field and stuff like that. I think it's constantly kind of changing up the game too. Like each time you play it, there's kind of different scenarios that start happening, and just even kind of utilizing like your gear and stuff. You can also kind of develop different strategies for how you're going to try to figure out where the shark is, and you kind of have to learn that in the beginning. How can you utilize everything that you have and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So, going into the second act, I know that you in particular felt like a very different style of game.
It did.
Kind of going into it. What were your thoughts on that?
Well, it's interesting because you said the first act felt like it was quicker, which I agree with.
Yeah.
But I felt the gameplay was slower.
In the second act, it just felt like it drew out more.
It was a longer playtime,
right?
But it actually seemed like there was more happening. It was a faster gameplay style,
right.
And I enjoyed it because it kind of had some RPG elements to it.
Yeah, it really did. It was kind of interesting because, like, your board becomes like this boat, and the boat can actually like take damage,
right?
And so it's kind of like you don't just like. You're not just moving characters around, you're actually kind of seeing like physical changes on the board, right?
Yeah,
and then there's also sort of the use of the different weapons and trying to, once again, sort of there's that anticipation game. Where's the shark's going to resurface? Where they're going to attack?
Yeah.
People fall in the water. Oh my gosh, I got to use an extra move to try to get out of the water because the shark's going to hit me. Like,
right.
It's sort of that kind of, it's very intense as you're losing ground and you're trying to figure out, man, we're not getting a lot of hits in. We need to figure out where he's going to be because we're running out of.
And there's lots of different items with different.
And I thought it was kind of interesting how you could utilize other things like combinations. Like one of the things that I like that kind of almost referenced the movie is that like you could get an oxygen tank and it could do like if you used it on the shark.
You could use it as a weapon.
Right, you could use it with like a gun or something and it could do like more heavier damage to the shark. So it's kind of like you had weapons that by themselves did damage as they were, but you could also kind of combine them to get like a more heavier hit, do more damage to the shark to try to get them to where they die and you can win the game. So
I felt like the first half felt very much kind of. I mean, it was intuitive. I really enjoyed playing it, but it felt more board gamey. And then the second half, I thought was really cool. I think there was just a lot more happening and a lot more interesting outcomes you could get throughout your different moves.
Right, and even things like in that second half is when you start using like the die and stuff, and that's kind of more like you kind of said RPG, where you're rolling for hits and things like that. Yeah, it really did kind of have that feel.
And the different weapons had different
and they have different levels of damage and things you could combo up with.
Different modifiers,
So I do think that it was kind of unique having that game that kind of had two different almost styles of gameplay to it. So you kind of had two different experiences while you're playing one solid game, which is kind of neat. So I guess it kind of falls in line. It's based off the film. And, I guess it is sort of that part where, there's part of the film where it's kind of like them on the island trying to investigate why, what's happening, these shark attacks, and it's kind of just this kind of almost like a mystery kind of thing going on. And then you got the next, later off in the movie, they're actually out in the water and they're fighting the shark, so it's kind of more of an intense action-packed part of it. So, I guess it kind of has that feel, like the film kind of plays out. I thought it wasn't a very difficult game to learn either. I think out of
I didn't
some
think
of the
so.
previous ones we've tried, I think it's actually one of the easier ones to pick up.
Yes, I
Because
agree.
what I liked about it is each character, even the shark, has these cards that are almost like, I call them like cheat cards.
Uh-huh.
And they literally have all your options laid out in front of you for each move set, so you can constantly, instead of having to flip through like a rule book and remember all the options you have, you constantly got that cheat card right there available to you. I kind of like that. I've seen it in other games, but it's not always something you have available. And it's kind of nice to kind of have that to constantly keep yourself in tune of what the rules are and how you can play each round or whatever. So
Yeah, no, I agree with that too. As someone who doesn't really play board games that often, I really would have liked to have had something like that with the last games. Even
right.
though I still thought even though they weren't that difficult to pick up after.
I could see it, like they're one of those that you can pick
Repetition.
up after time, right?
Yeah.
But it felt like in the beginning there was a lot of having to reference
Right.
the book to
Exactly.
remember, like, oh gosh, like
It was
what are
really
all
cool
the
to have that.
options?
I did really like
Yeah,
that. I thought
yeah.
that was a really cool feature.
So, overall, I enjoyed it. I definitely liked Act 2 of the game a lot more than I did the first half of the game. But overall, I think it's fun.
It is.
We know it took us maybe like an hour to play it. It wasn't like extremely time consuming, and it, like the learning curve wasn't super hard. So I enjoyed it. I think you could definitely do another playthrough. So I would definitely recommend it.
Uh-huh.
It's just, a cool game to have in your collection. I mean, Jaws, that's pretty neat to see something like that. So, I definitely recommend it to people to try it out. And, it's a fun game. I really enjoy it.
Yeah. Although I wasn't a fan of the first half, I really did see how I did see how, as someone who wasn't a fan of the first half, I do think it was necessary to play it to get you set up for the second half.
Yeah.
So that within itself, for another playthrough, would be something I could keep in mind while I'm playing the first half.
Right.
Is the different decisions that are made within this time period can affect, a later one.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think that would be a really that'd be something that would maybe kind of change my outlook on that, with knowing how the second half plays and having that element present. So no, I did. I loved the second half. I thought it was super fun. I was really engaged in it. Yeah, I definitely recommend it as well. I thought it was a really cool game.
It actually felt kind of action packed, didn't it?
It did,
in the
yeah.
second half,
A lot
yeah.
was happening, and it happened quick, and I really
yeah.
enjoyed it.
So there you have it, folks. Jaws, check it out. It's a fun game, scary, exciting, action packed, adventure, everything you want in a board game. So anyways, check it out in the link below. We'll see you next time.